So you're thinking about moving to South Florida and you're just exploring, trying to figure out the differences between Miami and Fort Lauderdale. Well, there are some big differences. These cities cannot be any more different than night and day. So in this video, I want to go over a lot of those differences so you can be well prepared and make a more informed decision. If this is your first time on the channel and you want to know everything there is to know about living in South Florida, then subscribe below and tap the notifications bell so you can be first to know about all the market updates. My name is Josh and my team and I get calls and emails every single day from people just like you looking to move to South Florida. We absolutely love it, so whether you're looking to move in 1 week or 1 year, give us a call, shoot us a text, send us an email, or you can even schedule a Zoom call, all in the description down below. So let's get started. So as I mentioned, I want to go over some of the major differences between Miami and Fort Lauderdale. So Miami has more of that vibrant, big city, cosmopolitan feel. You have the skyscrapers. Obviously, you've got the beach at both cities, but the beach in Miami isn't really the big draw because the beach honestly is only on the northern half of Miami. The southern half of Miami doesn't actually have a beach. South Beach, in fact, is more kind of central Miami downtown than it is South Miami. They call it South Beach because it is the southernmost beach of South Florida. And because of this, the beaches are going to be a lot more crowded, but if you like that people watching atmosphere, that could be something you're more interested in. You'll find a lot more entertainment in Miami. There's a lot more parties going on, a lot more events. In fact, last weekend I just went to a music festival in Wynwood, which is an area in downtown Miami. They actually blocked off, it was like 4 or 5 city blocks. It was awesome. But even if you live further north, you can definitely just take a trip to Miami from time to time. Now, speaking of taking trips, we can't talk about traveling without talking about driving and traffic, and the traffic in Miami is worse than the traffic in Fort Lauderdale, and your car insurance will actually probably even be higher, so keep that into account. You really have to pay a lot of attention with driving in both areas, but especially in Miami. People are crazy on the roads. It feels like Fight Club out there. It's just insane. I do not like driving in Miami. If you live in downtown Miami, you might not even actually need a car. There's a people mover train that goes around in a circle. It's completely free, gets you all around downtown Miami. And you can take trains to some of the further north cities and towns. There's a couple trains, some high-speed trains that'll go all the way up to Orlando now. Let's talk about the cost of living between the two. So this is where it gets a little bit complicated. When you look at housing, yeah, the average housing price in Miami is a little bit higher than it is in Fort Lauderdale. And on paper, the cost of living somehow is lower in Miami than it is in Fort Lauderdale. But I don't think there's a whole lot of truth to that if you know what you're doing. Let me give you an example. So Miami is very diverse, okay? So there's a lot of cultural mix going on in Miami. And because of that, you've got a lot of different types of shopping you can do. And so if you are careful, your cost of living actually won't be higher in Miami because it's only higher in those really affluent areas where they're price gouging. Whereas in Fort Lauderdale, the pricing is a little more level across the board, so you don't really have to know where to go. You can pretty much go anywhere and the pricing is normal. Whereas in Miami, some places are really expensive and other places are much cheaper. And so depending on where you live, you might be able to go grocery shopping in like a different grocery store. For example, my favorite grocery store is actually a Brazilian grocery store. Absolutely love it. The food is excellent, the fruit is fresh, and the prices are just way cheaper than your local Publix. But generally speaking, your cost of living is going to be a little bit higher in Fort Lauderdale. And obviously it will depend on what part of town you live in, but just kind of know that even though the house pricing is lower in Fort Lauderdale, your general cost of living is higher, so they kind of even out. So you can kind of take the cost off the table between those two, they're fairly even. Now, one big factor is crime. So crime is higher in Miami overall. Now, obviously there's going to be pockets that have higher crime and pockets that have lower crime. So make sure you take a look at some of these maps that are posted by the police departments that show you where the crime levels are higher so you can live in an area that has less crime, because if you're anything like me, that seems like a pretty big thing to be concerned about. Now, Fort Lauderdale does have a more laid back environment. It's got that more of like a beach town feel, whereas Miami has more of that big city feel. So if you're looking for that more laid back environment, definitely Fort Lauderdale wins on that regard. I like the more laid back environment most of the time, but I do like to get out and party from time to time. I like to get out and really go to those more vibrant things. And that's when you can just go to Miami. Fort Lauderdale is a lot more family friendly as well, whereas Miami is more geared towards your single life. So if you have a family, if you've got kids, Definitely, I think Fort Lauderdale is going to kind of push forward on that list a little bit, whereas if you're, maybe you don't have kids or even you're single, then definitely check out Miami. There's a lot that you'll probably like about Miami versus Fort Lauderdale because Fort Lauderdale is more family friendly. That might be something that really impacts your decision a lot. One thing that's really different is the amount of waterways that you have in Fort Lauderdale versus Miami. So if you're a boat person or if you want to become a boat person, you can get a home, a townhouse, or even an apartment that has a boat dock in Fort Lauderdale. There are literally tens of thousands of houses and apartments and condos and townhouses that have boat docks attached to them. And so you can get a really inexpensive boat dock where you can have your boat if you live in Fort Lauderdale. Whereas in Miami, it's going to cost a lot more to get a property that has water access. There's also a lot more world-class attractions in Miami. You've got a lot more museums. They have multiple art districts. Everyone's heard of South Beach. These are more like what I call global attractions. Whereas in Fort Lauderdale, there's really not a whole lot I can think of that's like a global type attraction. But then again, you can always just travel to Miami for a quick trip if you want to go check out some of these world-class attractions. So which city are you more attracted to? I'd love to know in the comments down below. Do you already live down in South Florida or are you planning on moving here? Let me know. YouTube thinks you're gonna like this video next. Let me know what you think of their algorithm.